This is part one of the forgotten jobs that made Apollo 11 fly. We start with the key question: the forgotten jobs that made Apollo 11 fly. Intro: over archive footage of Kennedy Space Center, bustling with workers. Most people can name the 12 men who walked on the moon. Almost nobody can name the people who made it possible for them to get there. And that gap in the story is exactly what this series is about. This is episode 1. There's no previous episode to recap. We're starting from scratch, from the ground up, which is exactly the right place to begin. The core question for today is this: what did Apollo 11 actually look like as a workforce? Not from the flight deck, but from the factory floor, the test facility, and the night shift. Section 1. The scale of it, at its peak, the Apollo program employed around 400,000 people. NASA's own workforce was a fraction of that. The vast majority were contractor employees, engineers, technicians, electricians, data processors, quality inspectors, working for the hundreds of private companies that NASA contracted to build, test, and operate the hardware and infrastructure the missions depended on. These weren't peripheral roles. Without them, the rocket didn't leave the ground. Section 2. The contractors nobody talks about take a company called Federal Electric Corporation. They don't appear in the popular history books, but they were embedded throughout NASA's operations, managing communications systems, technical services, and facility operations at sites including Kennedy Space Center. They were what's sometimes called a support services contractor. Not the headline name, but essential to keeping the whole system running day to day. Then there's the Central Instrumentation Facility at Kennedy, a building filled with equipment for processing and recording data from tests and launches. People worked there around the clock in rotating shifts. Some of them were processing telemetry data. Some were handling photographic records. Some were logging weather observations captured on 35mm film, checking for conditions that could affect a launch window. This is what the program looked like at 3 in the morning. Section 3. What these jobs actually meant. Here's the thing worth sitting with. Every one of those roles existed inside a system with almost no tolerance for error. A missed weather reading, a miscommunication in a test log, a faulty connector passed through quality control. Any of those could end a mission or cost lives. The people doing those jobs knew that. They weren't working on a factory line making a product that could be recalled. They were working on a program where the stakes were absolute. That sense of shared responsibility across hundreds of companies, thousands of facilities, hundreds of thousands of individual workers, is what made Apollo function. It wasn't a single chain of command. It was an enormous, distributed human effort, held together by process, by documentation, and by people taking their specific job seriously. Closer, when you watch footage of Apollo 11 lifting off, it's worth knowing that the people watching from the ground, some of them, at least, spent years building the thing that's climbing into the sky. Most of them never got a mention in the press conference. Most of them went back to work the next day. That's the real shape of Apollo. And we've only just started looking at it. Next episode, we go deeper into how the contractor system was actually structured, who was responsible for what, and how NASA managed a workforce that large without the whole thing falling apart. If this kind of history interests you, subscribing means you won't miss the next one. That is part 1 of the forgotten jobs that made Apollo 11 fly. In part 2, we explore the next key question. Subscribe so you do not miss it.